just because I'm sitting next door in an office beside you doesn't mean I'm not online shopping. I can shop online from home and I can shop online in the office. My productivity is not directly related to my proximity to my supervisor.
Yeah.
This is Craig and Andrew, two Ranger qualified Army officers with MBAs, here to help you improve your business through leadership.
Each week, we'll deliver easy lessons from the battlefield to the boardroom on how to improve team performance. If you're a leader or want to be, this is the place for you.
Welcome to the cohort.
Disclaimer: the views in this podcast are those of the authors alone and do not represent the views of the Department of Defense or the U.S. Army.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Command Post Cohort.
Welcome back, everybody.
We're here in a new year of 2026, and I think there's some topics that come up, especially in the past, we'll say 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. Every year now for about 6 years, we've been hearing about this.
Yeah, and so one of the most common things that we hear people bring up, usually around the turn of the year, is about, are we going to bring everybody back into the office?
Yep, return to office. Everyone, return to office.
Yeah. Or we hear we're going to relook our office policy and we may have more remote workers than we had traditionally. I will admit that this has gone in both directions over the past several years. I think the big catalyst for this was COVID-19 back in 2020. But today we're going to kind of talk through what this means for leadership, how we can address this as leaders, and what are some things that we need to think through and consider before we make some wide sweeping policy changes.
Yeah. I think when the pandemic hit, a lot of people, well, clearly were unprepared for it, right? But then when that question came up, right, of when is it okay to come back to the office, right? That was the default, was everybody back to the office. And that's the way a lot of organizations went. Mandatory, everybody back in the office, just like it was before. Okay, but you might be missing opportunity to save money or make the work experience better, retain employees, all that kind of thing. I don't think it's just a standard everybody back to the office and it's gonna be back to the way it was and be better that way.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like a lot of times people look at it as it's an either or. Like it has to be yes or no. It's either we all work here or we're majority remote and we just have somebody here for customers or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And I think that the more you look at it and if you do some like real analysis on what your organization needs, you'll find that a blend or hybrid of the two is probably closer to the real answer, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it depends, right, Craig? It depends even within the same company.
Yeah.
It can depend on the role and the type of organization, right? Because if you're a tech-based company, do you really need everyone in the office? Well, maybe not. If you're a big box store, do you need everyone in the office, so to speak?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah, I think that you've got to look at what is your mission as an organization, what are your outcomes, and it really goes down to the team level. Because in those examples you gave, your big box store, I may have to go in to run the register or to run customer service, but does that mean the accounting department needs to all be in the same building as me? Because generally speaking, if I overgeneralize here, we'll say the accounting or finance, those may be more individual contributors that they don't need a lot of collaboration. They don't need to face the customers. Like they're going to have the ability to achieve their outcomes, whatever their objectives and key results are for their team, without having to be physically located at the same place.
Yeah, we're in a place now where we have the technology to enable an accountant to do the work required for the position from home, right? Still produce the required reports, still be actually working, but not actually have to be in the office. Now, there may be times when required meeting takes place, but even then, you could do that remotely even, right? But yeah, like the cashier, the all the people working the back end room to stock the shelves, that has to happen by hand, right? No,
Yeah.
you can't do that remotely.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always gonna be some that have to be there.
Mhm,
But I think that there has been a lot of organizations who've tried to make these wide sweeping policies, and it's like everybody's coming back.
mhm.
And, there were some organizations pre COVID where remote work was actually alive and well. I would consider us in one pre COVID. The Army does like to send people to austere locations all around the world
Yeah,
and expect you to meet the standards and achieve your missions. And your boss may or may not be located at the same place as you.
yeah, yeah, Craig. The Army's been working remote really since radios were invented. If you really want to think
Absolutely.
about it, the
Yeah.
actual work that we do, we're quite dispersed
Yeah.
when it comes time.
Yeah. Very rarely, when I'll use myself in Afghanistan for example. The majority of that deployment, my commander was not located at the same geographic place as me, was a helicopter ride away. This is not something that was just, oh, he could walk down the hall to see what I'm working on. The
Yeah,
majority of that deployment, it required a lot of planning to get from one place to the other if he
yeah,
wanted to come and see what I was doing. But like you mentioned, we have things, technology, the radios, which is one form of it, as well as telephones and laptops where we could get on a call just like we are here today and be able to have those conversations. And you can even collaborate remotely. I know that's one of the excuses that I get heard a lot. Like, well, they can't collaborate if they're not together. And it's like, well, are there times where it's better to have 10 people in the same room with whiteboards and paper and crayons? Absolutely. There's a time for that.
mhm,
But if we look at the calendar and say, okay, how often are we going to have this, collaboration? Is this a quarterly thing? Is this a monthly? Because clearly they're not doing it every day, or they're probably not getting anything else done. So that's the thing about collaboration is you come together to kind of work through some solutions, but then you have to go back to your own team and department and actually implement that stuff.
yeah,
And so I think that there's a way that this can be done effectively. And I would say, if we've got to boil it all the way back down to one thing, is it, do you trust your team
yeah,
to not have you looking over their shoulder?
yeah. Because that's kind of where what I came to. Craig was like, okay, you worked remotely, so to speak, in Afghanistan. What are the conditions that allowed you and allowed that relationship with your boss uh, to work? Right.
Yeah.
What are the things that y'all did beforehand and during to make sure that the needs were met?
Yeah, I think that, you could look at that train up because, early on in that role, I was at the same location as him when we were back here in the States. And so you go through that training process and you build that trust to where you then realize, like, okay, he's okay out there achieving those objectives without me being next door. And I think that the standards that were set, those expectations of behaviors and performance, and being held accountable to those throughout the team, not just me exclusively, but knowing that, my organization was held to a particular standard.
Hmm.
And then the ability to communicate. You mentioned the radio is a great example of that, of just, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm working on. We actually would do daily updates via the radio to where you could
Mm-hmm.
call and talk. It's an amazing thing, the radio. And you get an update from everybody, and that lets everyone stay informed. That's a form of collaboration of how are we working back and forth. That if I hear in this daily update what this adjacent company has a problem with, after that update, I can call them and we can work through how we can assist each other in those things. And that didn't mean that I had to get on a helicopter and go sit down next to him to do it. We were able to achieve these things at great geographic distance.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so I think you hit on a couple of key points, right? There was like daily contact between the two. You reached out to him, or he reached out to you, and you talked, even over the radio, a few, for a while, at least once a day, right?
Yeah.
I think that goes a long way. And then that underlying sense of standards and trust, right? I think you two had a relationship such that he trusted you to do what you said you were going to do or what he asked you to do, and then you knew the standards to accomplish those things.
Yeah, and I think that, we look at it in a business light of, okay, well, we can all be in the same building. Why should we not be? And I'm not here to tell you that there's something wrong with return to office and being there all in the same building. There's definitely some advantages to that. But I don't think we should view either as superior to the other. It is like we mentioned earlier, it depends. And that's not meant as a cop out as an answer. That's meant as you actually have to look at what are the roles that are involved, what's the intent there.
Mm,
Because
mm,
if
mm.
I actually have we'll call it a creative team, and they're trying to develop and create something, you may want those 10 people in the same room with the whiteboards so they can draw and create. You may want them in there 3 days a week. And if that's the case, then it might make more sense. Not saying they can't do it remote, but you have to look at this, I think, with more deliberate analysis.
Mhm.
And sometimes when I talk with organizations about their work from home policy or return to office, it's very, very overarching and just take it or leave it
Yeah,
mentality.
yeah.
And I would caution people with that because just like leadership, we talk about there's not a checklist, there's not a this always works for everybody. So is the location of the work.
Mm.
Because just because I'm sitting next door in an office beside you doesn't mean I'm not online shopping. I can shop online from home and I can shop online in the office. My productivity is not directly related to my proximity to my supervisor.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
if you're still
so,
sending out the reports that are required,
yeah,
on time.
yeah, does it matter? Does it matter
Yeah.
where I'm physically located if I can achieve all of my objectives and my team is supported? I don't think it does, but I think in the past few years, there's been some organizations that have made these changes that no, no, everybody's coming back in. And my question is, well, why? What is the purpose? We talk about
Yeah.
purpose a lot. And what is the purpose of having everybody? And you could rephrase that and say, well, what's the purpose of being remote? There's I think a case to state it in either direction. I mean, it may be something as simple as employee retention,
Mhm.
or it could be, hey, I've got somebody who's really good at business development, but they need to move around the country freely and not be tied to, well, you got to be in the office 2 days a week. So what? If they're developing the
Yeah.
business for me, and they're getting these sales, I do not care where his desk is. But we have to look at what is the purpose behind these decisions we make.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head, man. It's about leaders adapting and focusing on, the intentionality, right? What is your intent for this role, right? What is really needed
Mm.
for this role? And that may be, much harder than a blanket statement, right? 4 days a week
Yeah.
in the office.
Well, I think that one reason those blanket statements get made is in the name of fairness. And a lot of times leaders, especially I've seen it with new leaders, they default to wanting to be fair because they want to be a just leader. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's a admirable quality. But life's not fair. And to overgeneralize a little bit there, but the reality is I should not punish, or punish is probably a strong word, but I should not make a standard that has to apply to everybody because people are in different roles. Teams have different objectives. Should I prevent we'll call it accounting department from working remotely just because I have cashiers at the store?
Mhm.
If I have a brick and mortar location and let's say I got to have 10 people there every day, but I've got 50 people that work for my company. Is it unfair that I have all 50 people come in every day because those 10 people have to be there? Or as a leader, can I, you look a little bit closer at this and say, well, yes, Craig has to come in. Maybe he's here to weld these two pieces of metal together every day.
Yeah.
Well, that's really hard to do remotely. However, my sales rep who is reaching out and making new contacts and finding us customers may be able to better achieve those objectives while working remotely.
Yeah. Well,
But
I was thinking about, the concept of fairness you brought up there, right? That, requiring the cashier to come in may not be fair, but, in reference to the accountant, right? Okay. But what does the month of April look like for the cashier versus the accountant,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So if we're basing the argument solely on fairness, oh, well, if it's only fair that everybody comes in, well, it's not fair to begin with. So
yeah. These
I
are
don't think
not,
that's a good argument.
yeah, and these are not equal positions.
Yeah.
The sales team is held to different standards and
Hmm.
accountability of different metrics than the production team, which is different than the marketing team, which is different than accounting. But we as leaders have to be able to look at all these different departments and
Yeah.
realize that there will be some standards that go organizational wide on behaviors, but there's a lot of standards that are very specific to that role and task. And that's where we've got to look at it more closely. And I've seen where it's a little easier and faster to make the decision if we just say, well, it would be fair to everybody if we prohibit this or if we make everyone do that. But the reality is it doesn't apply to everyone equally.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes as a leader, you've got to be able to explain that to somebody. But if you take the time and it's a deliberate decision, I think you can comfortably explain to Craig why he does have to come in and Andrew does not, or vice versa.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that when we're making our decisions as leaders, though, we understand the purpose and the intent behind it. And it's not just a knee jerk reaction because that's not going to help us in our quest for trust.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking that something you just said about making the decision, I think that's pretty important too, right? If you can sort through it all as a leader and decide, this role probably needs to be remote, hybrid, in office, and this person the opposite or whatever. Like, okay, you're the leader, make the decision, right?
Yeah.
Now, can you go back and change your mind, right? Well, I mean, you could, but it has to be in light of like new evidence, right? You can't be
Yeah.
all wishy washy about it. Like, oh, we're all coming in all the time. No, just kidding. We're sometimes we're all coming in. Just kidding. Nobody's coming in. Right?
Yeah. 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 Because that breeds frustration inside the
Mhm.
organization. They're looking for that consistency, something they can, those standards that they can expect. But if you are bouncing all over the place, that can be very frustrating.
Because the bouncing around reflects a decision that was based on incomplete analysis, I'll say.
Yeah.
Right? If you're making a decision, you're sticking to it, there's a good chance you've thought through it and you've made the decision based on the evidence you have and what you think the outcome is going to be.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes you have to be careful not to make an adjustment too early when you don't
Mhm.
you haven't let that first decision take full effect and actually see the outcomes. Because if I say, okay, for the month of February, we're all going to be in office all the time, but by the third week, I say, okay, well, next month we're all going to work remote. It takes a while to see the outcomes of that. You're
Yeah.
not going to probably in 3 weeks have enough metrics and data to assess and say, well, this is what happened to production. This is what happened to sales. This is what happened to all these departments, and we either saw an increase or decrease. You have to give it time.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's a lag on a lot of these metrics that we use, and you can't just think, well, I changed the metric on or I changed the standard on Monday. By Wednesday afternoon, I should know if it worked or not. Like it just is not that fast.
Yeah. Craig, I love a good navigation example. So like if you're to give it time, you make a decision, right? So I don't know if you remember or not, Craig, land navigation. It was either in Tuskegee or out in Fort Benning, but there would be this area we call the Dagobah system, where it was just like it was just nothing but brambles and thorns and swampies, and it was just
Yeah,
awful. Right. Well, like imagine you're on one side of it, and where place you got to get to is on the other side of it. Now you can take the trail network to get around the Dagobah system. It just takes a lot longer
yeah,
because it's further. Or you could go straight through the Dagobah system because it's shorter and you'll get there faster, but you're going to have to go through the Dagobah system. So, Craig, you can't be in the middle of the Dagobah system going, "This is stupid. We should change. We're going back.
yeah,
Everybody, back up. We're going the long way. This is
yeah,
dumb." Whereas if you just kept pushing through,
yeah,
you got to the other side much faster. You just had to, get a little bit of time.
yeah. Just have to deal with it because there is anytime um, or a lot of times when there's been some decision made, a new standard or a new
Mm.
direction. Hey, this is the where we're going to push forward. We know it's going to be a little choppy waters there at the beginning, but you get in there and like, okay, this is not comfortable.
This is not
This
going
is
to.
difficult to move
My
through. I
boots
don't
are
like
wet.
this.
I keep getting caught up.
Yeah, and it's what happens sometimes is leaders will make the decision to change course too soon when it's like you almost had it. You talk about this with change management of like you've got to set those benchmarks so that you know you're going to come out the other side. But if you don't, what happens is you just get lost in the change. And so you get halfway through and then you turn around to come back, but then somebody convinces you, no, no, this is the shortest way. We've got to stick it through. So you go back through again and you get like, 80% of the way. And then you're like, no, this is too tough. And so you start backing out. And it's just, you don't want to get caught up in that. You want to make that decision and move forward. But um, you have to have enough information and stick with it long enough
Mm.
to be able to assess was that the right decision. You got to get to that objective before you realize you've just kind of been stomping around out there in the middle of nowhere in all the directions and things have not improved at all.
Yeah. So you gotta give the policy a chance to work before calling everybody back into the office or banning them from the office, whatever your decision is.
Yeah, because again, to go back to the catalyst of this, is it was kind of a really quick decision. Everybody had to
Mm.
react really fast. But now that we're not in the middle of a global pandemic, we have the ability to do a little bit more assessment and figure out what is going to work, what makes sense for everybody. And I think sometimes it's just the leaders have to explain because if you may have already done all this analysis and made the decision that it actually is best for everybody to come back in. But if you don't share that and you don't
Yeah.
communicate that clearly,
Yeah.
your team is going to be questioning how did you come up with this decision? But you can communicate the purpose and the intent behind it. And that's going to go a long way in maintaining or establishing that trust that you want to keep in your team.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree, man. So there's no I think the real point is, right, like there's no rule. Each organization's got to figure that out for themselves. Each leader at each level has got to figure that out for themselves. Go through the standard leadership principles
Yeah.
and then analyze it and make a decision.
Yeah. And this is one of those good examples of leaders have to be able to adapt
Mm.
to the environment. You have to adapt to what are the needs your team has, the needs your organization, the situation you find yourself in, and it always comes back to that leader being the one who has to adapt and figure out a way to drive the team on to success.
Yeah, man.
Well, we just wanted to talk a little bit about one of the common first of year topics that we hear a lot about, and it stays in the news a pretty good amount, and have a little bit of conversation of how that applies to leadership and how that affects us. We appreciate y'all. And if there's anything specific you'd like to hear our perspective on, always feel free to shoot us an email. You can go to commandpostcohort.com and find a way to reach us there.
Yeah. And you know, Craig, if you like today's topic and kind of how we went through it, you could take a look at our upcoming book, and I think you could
Yes.
figure out a way to think about it yourself. Maybe you can go through the system and
Yep.
analyze it and see what you think.
Yep. Book will be coming out first week in March. Yeah, we look forward to hearing from y'all. Be sure to drop us a line and hope you'll check out the book.
As always, take these lessons, use them, and spread them. Everyone is welcome in the cohort.
Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe for more, and drop us a line at commandpostcohort.com to request a specific topic.
We'll see you next time on the cohort.